Good evening, welcome. Any public comment? Don't think we have any public comment from Zoom. Any comments from members of the board?
Nope.
Excellent. We'll dig right in. Our first public hearing is for 1263 Reservoir Road and 435 Leominster Shirley Road, now known as 475 Leominster Shirley Road, the A&R being the first order of business. If the applicant would like to go ahead and walk us through the revised A&R plan, please.
Good evening. For the record, Bill Hannigan with Hannigan Engineering. At the last meeting regarding the A&R plan, we had, as you're all aware, we had both the site plan and the A&R plan here, and the question was brought up relative to the access easements that were shown in the site plans but not reflected on the A&R plan. And then the question came up about the part of the zoning that limits the amount of frontage you can obstruct with easements. And so we decided at that point, let's go back and find out what the answer is and get the building inspector involved, and that's what we did. So we have a letter. I know Adam's not here tonight, but I'm not sure if you guys got the letter from the building inspector.
We do.
Okay. So the building commissioner, basically we revised the plan and we reduced the easement in the area of, basically, the frontage goes from this line to this line, and the easement is not in this location here, and not in this location here. And if we go over to the site plan, you can see that's where our driveway access points are. Okay, so this easement, based upon the letter that was provided by the building inspector, or the building commissioner, does not encumber the frontage to prevent access or to prevent the issuance of a building permit, which I believe is what his letter says.
Okay, and this letter is referencing the plan that's before us this evening?
Correct.
Not the previous one?
Yeah, we did modify the plan, so now the easement is on the plan versus it being on a future plan.
Okay.
Which I think was part of the request that the board had.
Yep.
So just one question. So what you're saying, Mr. Hannigan, is those two openings within the easement will be the driveways?
On either side of the easement,
On either side of the easement? Okay.
Correct.
So Mr. Bernie is with us tonight. He's just remote. And I would like to just clarify something that was said at the last meeting, that the drives, I believe, were included in the encumbrances in addition to the easements. I thought that was in our bylaw.
Well, that was the board's assertion. In speaking with the building commissioner, he felt drives referred to drives that access something that was not related to the site, whether it was a common drive or some other rear lot that was gaining access through the site. His interpretation was that drives would not be subject, that driveways for the use on site would not be subject to the provision of drives within the bylaw.
So if that driveway was coming across our property and accessing another piece of land, that would be the encumbrance that would not be permitted.
Sure.
I want to look up and see exactly what it says. Does anybody have it?
The building official is
I just would like to read what it says. 250-5-1B.
It's actually quoted right within the letter.
No, I know that, but he only quotes a section regarding public utilities. The letter reads, "Except for public utilities in place at the time of the passage of this provision, no more than 30% of the required frontage shall be encumbered, by easements, drives, access strips, or ways of any type." Upon reviewing the submitted plan, it is my opinion that there is approximately 155 feet of non-encumbered frontage, which is over the required 150 feet of non-encumbered frontage. So I'd like to understand where he's getting the 150 feet.
There's 100 feet on the west side of the property, and there's 55 feet on the east side of the property.
It's actually 111 feet on the east side.
Oh, I apologize.
And that's only because if you look at the plan, So, Ms. Bertram, on this side, there's 110 feet, as shown in the detail of the plan. And on this side, there's 45 feet, but there's also the section of the curve that continues, which makes this total length on this side 111.53 feet on this side. So it's actually 111.5 feet on this side and 110 feet on this side. A total of 220.
27.
And
This is the actual length.
yeah, but what you need is technically 105 feet because of the fact that it's 30% of the frontage can be, quote, encumbered, so that would be 45 feet, so the balance would be the 105 feet. So that's why we did 110 and 111, to make sure that on either side of the easement we had sufficient unencumbered frontage.
So while she's looking at that, so there's nothing else that changed aside from the dimensions of the easement for the easement?
Well, actually, the easement wasn't on the previous plan, so the easement's been added to the plan.
So that's the only thing that's
Correct.
changed?
Yes.
I guess my only question on the issue would be how that relates to, well, let's back up. The easement in the first place was to benefit the town.
Correct.
And primarily the drainage structures in that area.
Correct.
Okay. And
Widening for the turn lane, I believe, as well. Because they've got a dedicated left turn.
okay. I'm just wondering how that all lines up with whatever drainage structures are there. In other words, does this easement overlay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it also overlays the area basically between the two entrances. The full length, I believe, is 425 feet is what we're showing for the easement.
Okay.
Okay, so that basically takes the area where the driveway ends on the west side of the easterly drive and goes to where the driveway begins on the east side of the westerly drive.
Okay.
And that's what the DPW director had requested, more for snow storage and access to that area than anything. So that's, the easement actually is for the benefit of the town, so that's why we're trying to provide it. And just for the record, the site plans, once this plan was endorsed, would have to be updated to reflect this easement. So the current site plan shows the easement a little bit different, but we can, on the next iteration, we can take care of that.
Okay.
So, I'm ready to move.
Yeah.
So I would move that we accept the A&R plan for 475 Leominster Shirley Road.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Nope, who just said aye?
Eric is on the phone.
Oh, okay.
Well, hearing voices from above.
All right.
And we have the Mylar for that, so we can endorse that once we're done for the evening. All right, moving forward to the public hearing, which was continued from 9/13.
So, just as a point of order, for the record, Bill Hannigan with Hannigan Engineering, but as a point of order, I need to get clarified on what members are, this is a site plan, correct?
Site plan approval.
Right.
Yeah.
So what members, are all the members that have,
Mr. Brenner is not with us this evening. It would be up to him if he wants to file a Mullins certificate for this meeting.
has anyone done that yet for this project? Because I think the first meeting we pushed off, correct?
We didn't have a quorum for one of them.
Right.
Yeah, but I think other than that, we've had everybody here. Mr. Torgensen is joining us remotely.
Okay.
So we have 4 out of the 5 members.
And Mr. Brenner can watch the meeting and file a Mullen certificate.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the record, Bill Hannigan with Hannigan Engineering. With me are representatives of the John M. Corcoran Company and the Brennan Group, Peter Mahoney and Tim Brennan, respectively. So the first thing I'd like to touch on, basically to go in order of where we've been, is probably the site plan review and the peer review done by Graves Engineering. We went back and made some modifications and submitted plans on or about the 26th of August, I believe. And since that time, Jeff has done his review, and we've had our comment response letter that we've put together. And his responses to our comments are basically stating that the technical aspect of the project has been dealt with. He's here to vet any questions that you may have. There are a couple of minor issues in my estimation that we can talk about. Item number 4 within Jeff's letter talks about the sight line out of the, talks about the sight line out of the westerly driveway. As you're looking to the west, to question, to make sure essentially that we have enough sight line in that area. We actually did review this previously with both Rob Oliver and Jeff during one of our meetings. But where there is a peer review going on in the traffic, we feel pretty comfortable that we can clear the vegetation that's needed for the sight lines, and that analysis has been already done. But I think that what we'll do is we'll just kind of wait on a full response in that comment until the peer review kind of also takes a look at it, because me as a civil engineer, I'm comfortable that we can make it work, but I want to make sure that the peer review has their say. But it does appear that we can clear the brush within the right-of-way, and we don't have to go onto someone else's property. Part of that ends up being where do you start your point for viewing, and where are you looking to? So that line has been established by our traffic consultant to turn out where that line is, and it appears that it works with some clearing within the right-of-way. So that whole peer review process will kind of vet that out as part of that ongoing process. The next comment that there was a question on was comment number 19. We have construction entrance questions on the project, and we have a construction entrance detail shown on the site plan, in the site plan package, the construction detail for that. And what Jeff or Graves is asking for is that we should provide that as far as its locations on a plan. Okay, so I have a sketch, a series of sketches which we'll get into, but the first one shows the construction detail, or the construction entrance location on the east side, and then the second one shows the west side, or vice versa.
Excellent. Thank you.
I had a flash drive that
Thanks.
Adam could have plugged in so people at home could see it, but he's at home too. So essentially what that is, and I'm not sure if the camera can pick up on this, but essentially what we're doing is we're showing the location of the gravel drive that would be placed at the entrance during construction, and that's really basically crushed stone that goes in about 50 feet. It rises up and then it falls back, and the idea of that is to pick up mud before it gets on the street. It's part of our typical construction series of plans, as well as the SWIP that we'll end up developing for this. One of the things that we'd end up doing would be requiring periodic street sweeping and monitoring to make sure that there was no debris and sediment brought out onto the roadway as part of this project, and that's an ongoing thing that happens essentially until the binding course of pavement is down. So those two sketches are intended to provide that, that detail or that level of location for that particular comment. Comment number 24, apparently there's still a slope calculation typo on the plans, but the calculations, as he states in his, the additional drain mill has been added, and GEI calculated a pipe slope of 1.1%, which reduces the discharge velocity to less than 10 feet per second. So that's accomplished, but what we'll have to do is just change that notation on the sheet that shows the detail or the numbers for the invert in, invert out, and the slope of the pipe. So that'll be done at the next iteration. And then his last comment was comment number 30, and somehow during the plot, a layer got turned off relative to the detention basin. So on that particular sheet, the contouring and labeling of the contouring in the detention basin area did not show up on the plans. But the information is still valid, and we'll add that to the next set prior to hopefully getting into construction. So another item that we sent in information relative to some of the questions with respect to traffic. I had this. Yeah, it is, okay. So we had sent over a sketch which showed tree cutting plan. This is the sketch that I'd like to review right now. I'm not sure if Adam can bring this up for the people at home.
Do we have that?
Yes.
So at the last meeting,
Oh, it's in the letter.
yeah. At the last meeting, there were concerns about Lemons to Shirley Road and what could be done for that intersection. There's a lot of traffic that goes around that corner. There's truck traffic in the area between the various users being Powell, Keating, and those entities that go to Keating to get materials, to get asphalt, to get concrete, to get stone, etc. So there's a lot of concern about the intersection itself. So what we did was we went out and we took a look at, literally drove and took some pictures along the inside of the curve as you go west to east. So it would be the curve on the inside of the west to east curve on the opposite side of Reservoir Road. And what we noticed, and the pictures are in the back to kind of illustrate that, is there's a significant amount of existing vegetation in that area that if it were cut would significantly and substantially improve the sight lines around that corner. So we then went and met with representatives of the P.J. Keating Company as well as the owner of the land, and just to be clear, the Keating family may own the land, but they don't operate P.J. Keating anymore. So they're two separate entities. So we kind of had to go through the channels to get to the people that would be able to make this decision. And what we did was we were able to get them to agree that we'd have a cooperative approach to this, to basically clear from the edge of pavement, just to define a line. We figured we'd use the edge of pavement as the line that's on the ground that everyone can see. 20 feet out, we would basically cut the brush to grade and cut all the trees down to grade as well. And that would really improve the sight lines going around that corner to the point where the whole area just becomes safer. And I think that that's one of the concerns that with the additional traffic that we have from our project, you know, what can you do with that intersection? The geometry is what the geometry is. The right-of-way is in a certain location that, you know, you really can't get away from it. But P.J. Keating Company was very willing to work with us on doing that, and we've actually provided a letter from them that they would work with us in a cooperative nature to get this done. And the intention would be that we would Yeah, so they'll do the work sometime when the building permit is issued, and prior to an occupancy permit, that area will be cleared out and cut. So that's what we're throwing on the table for additional consideration of the board. I think that's going to be a significant improvement in that area relative to the sight lines. The other thing that came up at the last meeting was the question relative to abutters to the north of the project, relative to sound and whether the requirements of the bylaw were being met with the project. As this is an industrial area, there's a lot of things that are already in the area that make a lot of noise. But what we did was we brought in a sound consultant, and that's my name for him. He'll tell you what his real title is and what his real credentials are. Mike Lanen, he's here tonight. So he reviewed the site, reviewed the bylaw and the requirements, reviewed what our uses are, reviewed what the surrounding uses are, and came up with basically a resolution to how we would be able to basically contain the sound on the site. And that really is done, and I think we had talked about this at the last meeting, it's really done with berms and walls to prevent sound from passing beyond the limits of where they are. So on the plan that I just handed to you, there's a couple sketches in there which I'll let Mike explain what he's doing and why we have them, but essentially the number in this particular area that we're looking for is 12 feet. We're looking for 12 feet from grade to help with the sound deadening or the capture of sound prior to it passing beyond the property. And I'll switch over here for a second. So the two areas really of concern are to the northeast and then to the northwest, okay? And the neighbors in this area here, what they're experiencing essentially is sound that is allowed to travel from, probably the Keating operations, and it seems like there's almost an open corridor up the rail spur out to Ruth Street, basically. And to the northwest, that same conduit or avenue of sound being able to travel heads out towards Fire Road 15, I think it is, to the northwest. So Mike will get into how this works, but what we're looking at doing, you can see the tree cover, and in here we had basically this was the end of our construction line here, the end of our construction line here, and what we're proposing is to basically create a 12-foot high berm along this entire section to capture and hold in the sound, to extend this berm to about here to capture the sound. So this is essentially 12 feet above the proposed grade in this area, and I think this one actually is 12 feet above the high point over in here, figuring that the trucks would be going around and coming up to a high point, then going back down. On top of that, we would be adding a sound deadening wall in this location here. That would be basically 12 feet high as well. And then that would really allow us to capture all the sound and prevent it from passing through that area. So this particular element would be designed prior to construction, but the intention is to be able to capture and hold the sound to the south. Now we know what that noise was. All right, so with that, I'll let Mike come up and have him introduce himself, tell you his credentials and what he does and how he does it, and then from there, we'll let you take a look at the plan.
Hello. How you doing?
Hello. Hey. Good, how are you?
Good. Thanks for all you do. I've been on some boards like this, and it's a lot of work, and good for you guys volunteering like that.
If you could just...
I will. Yeah, I was going to get to that. Yeah, I was just... Hello. My name is Michael Lanen. I am a professional engineer, environmental engineer in Massachusetts. I'm the president of Tech Environmental, and we're a air quality, odor, noise, and dust nuisance firm, essentially. We deal with nuisances. We work for proponents, and we work for municipalities, towns. One of the projects we've been doing for the last decade plus is I review all the projects that are submitted to the Devon's Enterprise Commission to make sure they don't have dust, odor, noise, light, and a lot of the projects there are somewhat analogous to what we're talking about here. You have your noise bylaws and so on, but we also have some industrial sources nearby, and those are going to, to me, the first thing I do is I look at the site, right? And from my perspective, this is an excellent site for this warehouse, mostly because of the topography. Yeah, I'll take that with me. Mostly because of the existing topography. You have a natural berm here, okay, that they're not going to eliminate. They're just going to cut into to have the pathway come around the building. On both sides, you currently have industrial areas, so we don't have to worry too much about the sound on these sides. Below it is also industrial area. It's only this area to the north that's the concern. So when I looked at it, I said, okay, well, this is great. We've got actually 3 berms here. We've got the berm that exists here that they're going to regrade, but they're going to keep it there, and I will correct you a little bit. We're not trying to reduce the sound. We're trying to reflect it back. So because it's sound power. Power exists. It's going to go somewhere, and so what we don't want it to do is we don't want it to squeeze out the sides here. Okay, so that's essentially what we're doing with these berms. Okay, so it's great that the traffic is set up to go around the site, because that minimizes the amount of backing up and so on, other than to go into the loading docks. Loading docks are located, I think, in a good location relative to the larger, louder sound source over here. On this side, we do have some concern about this rail spur, and I looked at that, and we looked at all the topography in this general direction, and while we can enhance the berms here, which you did a great job with the drawing here, showing how much more it has come up here or will come up. All this material will be on site that they're going to excavate. So the building's actually going to be a little bit lower and everything than today. As you go out there, you can see that some of the site's going to be a little bit lower. It's going to be cut into all here. All that material then can be used for this berming here and here. The existing area right here, this kind of just keeps going like that. So there was a little bit of a hole here where sound could get up there, and we could have addressed that by a wall along there or this natural berm. And the advantage of the natural berm is it has some absorptive capacity, when it's not winter and it's not frozen solid like a rock. But during most of the year, we get some good absorption out of the vegetated material. So this is actually, if we take this berm and we run it up like that, I think we would probably do everything we need to do up in this area, okay? But, I looked at it and I said, like I do when I'm reviewing this stuff for the Devon's Enterprise Commission, what can you do for, what can you do additionally for not much more money that will be beneficial? And that's what we looked at here. So we looked at this wall here. And the reason why this particular wall is important is because the rail spur's here and there's no room to put a berm in that area without cutting back on this storage area where they're going to put the snow in the winter and occasionally maybe a truck when they're moving around and so on. So in order to keep this area like this, we can put a sound wall up like this. And what that means is, as trucks are coming around here and heading out this way, all the sound that comes in here is caught in this nice little U, okay? And it really either gets absorbed or gets reflected back into the industrial area. I looked at also, would we want to extend walls on the sides? And I didn't really like that, because when I looked at it, I was worried about the sound reflecting off the wall and then kind of going up and out from, when it first comes in the driveway. It's better to leave these open and have the sound from the trucks on the site spill out into the industrial areas next door, as opposed to being channeled up towards the residential area. So we we looked at that, but that didn't make as much sense as creating a barrier that goes all the way around this like a U, and then reflecting the sound backwards, and really keeping the traffic moving around the building. Most of the parking here, this is all just passenger cars. We're really concerned about trucks, because when we talk about traffic, 2 cars equals a truck in traffic terms for traffic issues, as we know. But from a sound perspective, a truck is about 18 times as loud as a car. So we're really concerned mostly about the trucks relative to the cars coming in and out. They don't really affect us as much as the trucks. We looked at the traffic study that was done, and we accepted the highest peak hour in the PM that was in there for the daytime traffic, but we actually bumped up the nighttime one a couple of trucks because they don't have a tenant yet, and I just want to make sure that we consider all kinds of options. It is spread out over the 24 hours, so we're looking at, we looked at the sort of what would that be like for sound from here, and there's no problem meeting that 60 decibel ceiling limit at night. Okay, so that's going to be no problem. When we look at the Mass DEP noise policy, which you have also called out in your regs by calling out 310 CMR 6 to 8, it's actually in section 7. So within that, that's the noise policy, that's 10 dBA above background. When we look at that, there's quite a bit of background out there just with a portable meter, just looking at what it is during the day and the night, because the folks next door have 24/365 ability to operate. And so that said, just like when I'm doing something at Devon's, just because they're loud doesn't mean that something shouldn't be done like this berming and this wall to help reduce the sound, because what we want is we want all the industrial facilities to coexist together and not have any one facility use up all of the available sound so that everything can be developed and it's not all coming from one location. Granted that obviously the other source is much louder. It's on an area that's more open. It has a lot more reflective surfaces than this will have. I think it's my understanding that people are concerned because sometimes they will hear the facility next door, and I'm not here to suggest that we know anything about that. We didn't study that at all. But one thing to consider is when we're talking about the trucks for this facility, they come in, they back up, they know exactly where they're backing up. It's not like they're on a site where the piles move around every day and they're backing this way, they're backing that way, moving materials around. They come in, they back up, and then most of the activity occurs with the thing docked in the bay and and everything happening within the building. So it is different than what's next door when people are concerned about that. I know that there's concern about beepers and so on. And when we looked at the beepers relative to the Mass DEP noise policy, we include those in the hourly average. The beeping is exempt for safety reasons. It has to be louder. Now, it doesn't have to be as loud as the facilities next door because they fall under the construction backup beeper requirements. These are the ones that are for roadways, the DOT ones. So you're allowed to have them a little bit quieter as opposed to the OSHA standards for the roadway one. I mean, for the non-road equipment and so on is very set, and it's a very high level because that equipment can be fairly loud to begin with as opposed to trucks. So that is sort of the essence of it. We feel that with these berms, this berming here and this berming here and all this natural berming, the activities that are closest to this buffer area and then the neighbors is really shielded well, and then as you get further away we have even more distance, and that's even better. And that stuff is also going to be captured in this area to some extent, and then when it spills out the side, it will spill out into the industrial area right now. And there's a lot of buffer on either side. I noticed that this facility here, I went over there today before the meeting just to check it out. There is some some sound that exists all the time. There's transformers running, and there's some hissing of probably pressure lines and so on. So there's some elevated background always here, but there's obviously a lot more elevated background there. So the background is fairly high in this area, but that doesn't mean that this stuff shouldn't be done to best help the facility. So I think that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about, but I'd love to see if you have any questions.
Mr. Chairman, you talked about the natural berm. Does the height vary along the berm, or is the entire berm proposed to be 12 feet?
Here, in the part that where there's no work being done, it's actually taller than that.
Okay.
So here it's 348, elevation of 348. Over here, the top of the berm is 328. So that's like the minimum what we're adding on these sides. This is actually higher. And then this, if you go out there and you go to, I went over here today too, and you look in this area, this is actually higher than this. So you have this, then you have this man-made berm of the MBTA tracks that's very uniform, obviously height-wise. And then you have an additional berming here. And as you can see, it slopes down that way. And that's why we wanted to make sure we were really berming this side to help with that.
Bill, I saw you get up. Do you want to?
No, I was going to just point out elevation.
Okay. Do we have a copy of the sound study that you did?
I don't have a copy.
I treated
Not in
this.
our packets, anyway.
What's that? No, yeah, I treated this.
For the office has one, but
No, actually, I treated this as if I was doing it as a reviewer for, the Devon's Enterprise Commission. And I looked at it and I said, I can tell that it's going to comply, but what could we add to it that's going to make it better and really enhance it? And that's what this is. It's not necessarily a compliance demonstration as much as it is what can we do to enhance this and do the best we can here to go beyond really what we think is needed, because we don't want to just take credit for the background being high in the area. We want to make sure we're doing the best we can to control sound.
So the other part of it is that we wanted to do was go back. One of the things we wanted to make sure is that the board knew that we were listening to what the comments were, both from the board and from the public. Okay, so the intention basically is that by redoing some of the site plan information, we can accomplish the sound mitigation that would be required if we did a full-blown study. And on top of that, the recommendation is to add a wall in this location because of the fact that there's a gap that's developed by the rail spur. So that's really the approach, that we would be making revisions to the site plan at the recommendation of our sound consultant to mitigate and provide compliance with the regulations.
So do we have a copy of the revised site plan yet?
This is just being done today.
Okay.
Literally, so the site plans that you have are August 26th. Jeff has reviewed them. He's here. We have a couple small little items on that. We wanted to present this to show the board what we're doing and why, along with, and we have the two sketches that we provided to that, which basically is reflective of this. And then if we're all in agreement, then what we'll do is we'll do one more round of the plans, because I know that there are some traffic questions and potentially off-site work, but I think at this point in time, the site plans themselves are complete. And at that point, we can do another set, October 1st or whatever it might be for a date, and that would be essentially the plan set that would be approved pending the traffic peer review. So that, because I know you're going to want a set of plans to be approved, or a set of plans to approve that has all the changes in it. Yep.
I think, Bill, also it's important, you talked about waiting for the traffic peer review on the site distance. That may be something that, if it changes, you'd want to incorporate into the new set.
Correct.
You do have a copy of these.
we do.
Yes, yeah.
Two sides.
Yeah.
Plug the holes for sound.
Yep. I had one question, and that is, are there any plans for vegetation on top of these berms? Are you clearing what's there? What would be put back?
They would be vegetated. I think as part of this, we would obviously we have to put some sort of slope stabilization on to make the vegetation work, and I think that the same vegetation we were planning for this slope here would be utilized around these berms. I don't know if we've specifically have decided about planting on top of them, but I think if they're loamed and seeded and stabilized and wildflower mix and just allowed to grow and go wild, that's probably the best resolution to how that would, because that would give you the
Right, and this
the
area
absorbing.
is very, oh, I gotta take this, I'm sorry. This area still is still vegetated, because we talked about this today, and we wanted to make sure that we tried to leave a little bit of a border of everything around here. Because when you come over here and you come to this, obviously this whole area is vegetated. So, but you don't want to be able to see in there for the people that drive over to those houses. They don't want to look in there all the time. So leaving a little strip here is wise. You can see the existing vegetation line cuts there, and then it goes along here. So it fits within this area that slopes down the hill where it goes up into the railroad tracks. So there is some vegetation that will exist still here, all over in this corner.
So just for the graphic that we're looking at right now, where we stopped the trees and the grass and stuff like that at the property line, but beyond the property line there is additional wood lines and stuff like that between our site and the MBTA tracks. So the vegetation that we would place on the berms is going to need to be enough to keep those berms stabilized. So that's really the intention. Same with the slope, and I think that Jeff maybe made a comment about that slope in his review as well.
I'm just trying to pull up the satellite imagery to get an idea. And you've been out there, so with boots on the ground, you might have a better answer. And my question is, how much of that existing vegetation is evergreen versus deciduous? I mean,
I'm gonna say that it's probably more deciduous than evergreen.
Yeah, in that area,
Yeah.
there is some evergreen, because depending on which Google map you pull up, obviously, sometimes they're the winter ones.
Yep.
And there's only a few evergreens in there. But as you can see from the picture there,
that's
that's it today. You know,
Okay.
From the fire road looking that way, you can see it's.
I closed it. Sorry. I just pulled up the 2019 satellite imagery on GIS, and that picture was taken in the winter, and my estimate would say that about 30% of the vegetation, maybe a little bit more, is evergreen as you look along the MBTA track.
And I think that picture.
This is April of this year.
Yep. Okay.
Adam has.
Adams. Yep.
Someone's talking
From the Oz.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Oh, there we go.
Yep.
So here's the rail spur, here's, the concentration of evergreens on the area closest to the residence, and here's the area where the additional berms would be put in.
Yep.
So I think that,
And we talked about that, I'm sorry.
hold on.
Yeah, we talked about that today, because one of the things that, we wanted to make sure was that there was some remaining here. And that's why there is a green strip going along, right?
The grading is what the grading is to make it work, to create the berm. I think it's more important to create the berm than it is to try to save some of those trees, because we can always add vegetation to those slopes. That's something we can work through. I think with Jeff has a good understanding of what we've done before with respect to plantings, and it might be that as part of, my recommendation would be to I would really just loam seed and do a wildflower mix and let it go wild. That's what I would really do. It does a couple of things. It allows it provides that sound buffering that Mike was talking about. But the other thing is that if we go and plant things and they don't get watered and they don't get taken care of, the wild stuff's going to take over anyways. I think the biggest part of it, and you know this, that it may be that we have to loam and seed with the mix, let it grow, hit it again with the hydroseed mix, let it grow, hit it again. It might be that we have to do 2 or 3 iterations till we get stabilization, because stabilization really takes, a couple of years to really, or multiple seasons to have that happen. Any other thing?
Any other questions from the board?
One other question. You mentioned in the winter that if the ground is frozen solid, my question is, how effective will this berm be during the winter?
It will still have all of, I have to talk into the mic, excuse me. I apologize. It will still have all the properties of blocking the line of sight, which is the main thing. Okay, so it will be reflecting the sound back. So any of the sound that hits this is mostly going to be reflected back. Okay, as the truck goes around here, sound bounces off that. It has some absorptive capacity and that's why we like earthen berms, because when people are outside in the summer, you get that added benefit. But the main point for the berm is to block the line of sight. And that's what we're doing, is we're blocking this line of sight from going up and down. This is Fire Road 15. That's actually a named road, I think.
Okay, you just said the main point of the berm is to block line of sight. I'm interested in the berm from the sound perspective.
That's what I mean. That's what you do. That's how you get sound reduction, is again, remember, we're not reducing it, we're directing the sound
reflecting
power
it back
in another direction. So that's what this is doing. So that's, the berm is 100% for sound. In the summer, you get the added benefit of it having an absorption factor, and in the winter, we have that too at times, but we also have times where it's hard and it's frozen. And then you just have it blocking the line of sight. And actually in the winter it gets a little taller with snow and things. So, it's still going to work in the winter just as well. And I would argue better, because people aren't outside all the time in the winter, enjoying their yards and so on. And this is more helpful in the summer, the Vegetate part. But we're focusing on the wrong part of this. Blocking the line of sight is what gets us the sound reduction.
Okay. I've had an opportunity to talk to some of the people in the area. I've driven the area, and I've heard from some of the residents that the sound echoes over Lake Shirley from Keating's at all hours of the night. And that's my primary concern, is when we get into adding trucks that's going to be open 24/7 without all that beeping, I'm concerned that sound is going to carry, regardless of whether it's summer or winter, because they're saying it keeps them up at night. So they're in bed in their homes.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that in winter, it's going to be just as effective as it will be in the summertime.
Oh, absolutely. The fact that where you want to place a sound barrier, a noise barrier, is you want it to be as close to the sources as possible, okay, or as close to the receptors as possible. But that's not ideal, because we don't want to put a wall up in back of somebody's house and so on. We want to keep it here. So as long as we're closest to the receptors, this is going to work, and it's going to reflect the sound back that way. So, a truck, most of the sound from the truck comes from the engine, that's why we want to be 12 feet high with this berm, because most of the sound is about 2 meters. We think in meters for modeling and so on. So, 6 feet tall, essentially. So, this is below the line of sight for most of the sound from a truck. And that's really what we want to get into, is we want to be blocking that. And that's what we're doing. The difference between this and Keating, if you go over to Keating, it's a giant open area. A lot of it is hard in the summer and in the winter. And it heads off of there in direct line of sights and heads out. That's what this is doing. It's preventing it from going down, the areas that have the least amount of barrier, where they don't have, a lot of their activities occur above the MBTA elevation, and that's why that's traveling so far away. Go ahead.
Just a point of clarification, just the term line of sight, it's a sound term. It's also a visual term for traffic and stuff like that. But essentially, I believe, and I think this is what Mike is saying, is that if you can see from here to that house, you're blocking in front of it. The line of sound is different because that bounces all over the place. So by looking at the line of sight and blocking the direct path between the source and the receptor, you're essentially creating the ability to bounce that sound back in another direction. So the berm itself, whether it's vegetated, covered with snow, covered with ice or rock, it's preventing the sound from getting from the source to the receptor. Okay, so that really is the benefit. On top of that is that during the summer months when you have vegetation on there, there's a little bit of absorption of that sound.
Right. And one last thing is with the sound berms, right? The berms, the surface is like this. It's not like this, right? So when it's like this and the sound hits it, a lot of times it's reflected sort of up in the air as well as backwards. So you kind of get, again, sound power is always conserved. It has to go somewhere. But if it goes, up in the air, then it disperses much faster if the direction is that way than if it's straight in the line of sight there. So we actually prefer berms because they can be vegetated, they can be more attractive screening than the wall here. Because of those properties and also the way it reflects sound. But in some instances, this is what you need to do. And the way this one's set up is, it's nice because anything that gets in here is not going to end up coming back this way. It's going to come around this way as the truck comes around, hit off there, and then dump out into the industrial area.
And that's those slopes on there are 2 to 1. So 1 to 1 is a 45-degree angle, so it's a little bit flatter. So the ability to reflect up is actually there. Okay.
2 to 1, isn't that steeper than a 3 to 1?
2 to 1 is steeper than 3 to 1.
Okay, so it's not flatter. It's
No, I said 1 to 1 is a 45-degree angle.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and if you go a little bit flatter, yeah.
I have a question about your rendering. My understanding is the dark green indicates undisturbed areas?
No.
No?
Kind of.
In this drawing, the bottom is the tree line.
The intention of the dark line is to be woods. That's what we're remaining woods, or because there are areas on the other side that maybe those should be marked as woods as well. But the intention basically is that the grass areas are what you're disturbing, and then revegetating in the light green.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that there's not going to be work being performed on the other side of the dark green?
No, the limit of work would essentially be this tree line right here, all the way around the property. That's the intention. And that's a graphic. I should have had that as green, a dark green as well.
That's fine.
That's misleading. You're right. Okay.
So in those light green areas, any of the existing vegetation is going to be removed in order to do the grading?
South of the dark green.
Yeah.
And
These strips
Yeah.
only,
Yeah.
not this and not down here.
So even though the top of the berm is going to remain the same height, you're regrading the slope, you're cutting in.
no, the top of the berm in this area here actually is, this should be dark green.
Okay.
We're not touching any of the vegetation up here at all. Okay. So the top of this existing berm is going to remain as it is right now. Our limit of cut and fill comes in through here. A cut comes in through this area here. We'll be cutting down there at a 2 to 1 slope. This will be all stabilized and vegetated. What we've done is we've taken, it did end in this area here. What we've done is we've extended it around this way to create because this goes down to around 300 or 310 in this area here. So we're basically, what we're doing is we're filling in that hole, and basically this area here will end up being the top of the berm in that location there. So because of the fact we couldn't get all the way over, quite frankly, past the tracks, that's when the wall came into being on that side there. So essentially you have a complete capture of all the sound on the north side of the property, pushing everything to the south. Oops, sorry.
Any other questions from the board?
I have questions about the wall. Can you talk a little bit about what the wall will be constructed of?
Sure, yeah. So typically walls are designed in the final design part of it. From a sound perspective, what we want is a wall that will provide the equivalent sound reflectivity of 4 pounds per square foot of density, okay? And you can do that by either having a wall that's a solid wall that's that dense, or you can do it by a combination of absorptive panels and a thinner wall where you actually remove some of it by having pores that collect the sound. So the key is you want it to be 4 pounds per square foot for a specification, and we've talked about that, and we're going to look at what fits in well with the design at that point, and so on, to make sure it is sort of something that's easy to maintain and effective, because it needs to be effective.
And the note on the plan is that the proposed sound barrier will be designed prior to construction? How does that work, Mr. Chairman, as far as we would just make that a stipulation of the permit, of the approval for site review?
Well, ideally, the detail of that would be worked out before we approve the plans. but,
Exactly.
I guess I was looking at it more of we've given you the architectural renderings. We're not actually doing the construction drawings for the steel and the fire systems and all that other stuff as part of this, but we were just looking at that as being part. I guess we can probably submit a sample of what the wall is and what it looks like, and then do the final design.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, because, I mean...
That way you have something in the
we
folder.
have no
of what we're
jurisdiction
proposing.
over how you build the building. That's the building inspector and that process, but in terms of site plan, it's certainly more comfortable for the board to have something that is...
we can get like a sample of what...
Yeah, that's no problem. I think we can give you something this is what it's going to be, or equal, depending on, because some of the things to work out is obviously the foundation, is this one, is a heavier one good in this area, and so on, because my guess is where they did the borings for that, they got to look a little bit at what's over there from a grade point of view, and that will be worked out in the final design, little things like that they don't have any information on yet.
What the panels look like,
We can absolutely get you that, show you that, and show you how it's going to work.
Okay.
I think that I would make this analogous to a retaining wall, where they're indicating the location of it, or it is requiring that it's there. It is a structure the building commissioner is going to have to issue a permit for it. And I think very often the board in the past and other boards, it's standard practice to approve site plans with retaining walls, and the final design of the retaining wall with engineering stamps and whatnot is done as part of the construction drawing phase. So I think you can stipulate to the wall, you can stipulate that it meets the 4 pounds per square inch, or
Square foot.
square foot, and use the sample and say something similar to this or equivalent, and if it appears that it's not doing that, then you can take action at that point.
We're agreeable to that as well.
I think at this point, I'd like to invite Mr. Walsh up to go through his